my husband Garrett. Today we're continuing our series about how we find the types annoying, and today it's the INFJ's turn. So a quick note about this series. One thing that I always say is that if you get into typology and you start hating types more or certain functions more, then I feel like you're doing it wrong. I feel like as you learn about typology and as you learn about certain functions, it should give you a little bit more empathy and understanding to the point where things that used to annoy you, you now understand the value of, like if you're really getting into it. So in this series, types that are annoying, it's mostly just a tongue-in-cheek title. It was kind of just a provocative title, but basically we just want to talk about the growth points. So a lot of the things we talk about, they're not true of all INFJs. You've got kind of a spectrum of, healthy all the way down toward unhealthy. And so most of these behaviors you'll see with unhealthy types, but even so, it's not that I see all of these behaviors with all unhealthy INFJs. And it's also not that these behaviors are exclusive to INFJs. Just want to make sure I got my TI caveats. If I don't know my TI caveats, it's not exclusive to INFJs. And it's not all INFJs. Okay, I just want to make sure we get rid of the extreme thinking, okay? So I want to start off by talking about what we love about INFJs. I think one thing that I love is INFJ's passion for specific causes and even people groups. So I know a couple INFJs actually that are super passionate about children. I know one INFJ that's super passionate about people's special needs. I know one INFJ that's super passionate about the environment and specifically animals. So she has a really big passion for animals. And it seems like no matter what INFJ I talk to, there's some people group or group that they're particularly passionate about, and they really move the needle and do things to help those groups. And I think when you see that passion come alive in INFJs, that's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, my favorite thing about INFJs, kindness is definitely one of the top of the list. They're super kind type in general. I also love, I just lost. What was I going to say? Oh, how perceptive. We touched on it in the ENFJ. I love how perceptive they are in just human nature, I guess is a way to say it. But they seem to really notice small details about the people around them. They seem to know the people around them super well in a very perceptive way. So I like that about them a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Common mistypes. So if we're going through this video and some of this stuff doesn't resonate with you, I would check out a lot of times if you just take one test, you can be one letter off. Especially if you've tested as an INFJ, we'd encourage you to check out the ISFJ video and the INFP video, because those are two of the more common mistypes in that.
ISFJ and INFP, for sure. Yeah, sweet. So I want to get into the cognitive functions of this type. I just want to do a brief overview. So on the screen there are 4 cognitive functions. So their first cognitive function is introverted intuition. The words introvert and extrovert kind of have a different meaning in this context. Introvert means to turn inward. That's the vert, to turn, and then intro, inward. So it's to turn inward and toward the intuition. So intuition is the opposite of sensing. So sensing is what you're currently experiencing. So intuition is the opposite of that. So it's what you're not currently experiencing. So that could be the future is something we're not currently experiencing, and we have never experienced, I want to clarify. And is reading between the lines, kind of subtext, the lines, you could be reading a book and you're sensing it, you're reading the actual lines of the book, but then what you're not directly experiencing is maybe the subtext in between the lines. So it's kind of it can be connections between things, because those are also connections between patterns. Connections between things are not things that are readily experienced through your senses. You have to kind of make an inference about that. Their second cognitive function is extroverted feeling. So extroverted means to turn outward. So it's not going on in your head or inside you. You're turning outward. So this a lot of times includes, people, the world, a lot of things out here. And it's toward the feelings. So this could be feelings. This could be emotions. This could be group norms. How do we all feel about talking about politics or whatever? So it's really getting a gauge on how people feel about certain things. Their third function is introverted thinking. So it's turning inward to your own thoughts. And because it's not the external thoughts, the internal thoughts, it can be quite contrarian. It's a lot of times how your thoughts are distinct from other people's thoughts, very precise, accurate, can be very technical, and it can be very methodical, and it's pretty much just how your thoughts are different from other people's thoughts. And then their fourth function is extroverted sensing. So it's turning outward toward the things that you can experience through your senses, and pretty much a shorthand way is just like your experiences. So turning outward and being very focused on what you're currently experiencing. And when you're focused on what you're currently experiencing, that a lot of times is very present. Now, it's their fourth function, so a lot of times you don't notice that as much with people's fourth function. So yeah, those are their four functions, just very briefly, not super comprehensive, and there are the abbreviations on the screen. So like extroverted feeling is abbreviated FE. It's kind of the opposite order that maybe you would think, that E's for extrovert, F's for feeling. So yeah, let's get into it. We're going to go function by function, what we find annoying, pretty much just growth paths. Let's start with introverted intuition. What do you have, Garrett, for that one?
The thing I've noticed, this applies to both NI DOMs, so INTJs also. They can be very distant and aloof, it seems like. Like you don't really know them, they're sort of in the background. They can tend to observe and not participate as much. Just take a background role.
Yeah, for sure. As I was looking over, so I have a list of all the types on my phone, and I have about 10 INFJs. I think it's actually probably more. I would say it's about probably 10 women on that list and 3 men on that list, because I'm just always, when there are types that are kind of less common, I'm like very specific about making sure I put them on the list. And I did notice that I didn't know hardly any of them very well at all. There was one that I lived with, still hardly knew her, hardly. I mean, so my critique really is that a lot of them can be silent, like literally silent. I know some that are pretty talkative, but a lot of the ones on the list are just so silent. There's one I've known for like 8 years, hardly know her at all. So I say known. I've been around her a lot for 8 years, hardly know her. The one I lived with, hardly spoke with her. So yeah, that's kind of the critique, is I'm like, who are you? So like there is this kind of mysterious vibe about them that's intriguing, but a lot of times, by far and away, like a ton of the people on the list, the most quiet people I know. Some of them are pretty talkative, but some of them, I mean, the ones that are quiet on the list, the most quiet people I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all these functions are on an axis. So the axis of NI is that SE, the lowest function for you. And SE is really good at showing up in the world, expressing itself, being there, being present, being active. And NI can be the opposite if it's not balanced with SE. And so you're disengaged, you're unactive in the world around you, you're sort of separate from what's going on right now and what's happening. And so because of that, you can lose touch with people around you or engaging in current relationships.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm thinking of this right now, but it's we did a Pirates of the Caribbean marathon. So in the second Pirates of the Caribbean, it's like Will Turner's dad becomes like one with the ship, sort of. He's like this sea creature that's one with the ship, and like it's like sometimes he pokes his head out to talk, but maybe it's not until the third movie. But he becomes kind of like molded into the ship, and that's kind of something that reminds me of INFJs. It's almost like they're part of the background in the quieter ones I know, rather than the foreground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that the correct use of the word foreground?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One thing that I wonder about is, I hear from a few of them kind of these plans that they have, like they want to be in the Peace Corps, or they want to travel abroad, or, this environmental stuff. Anyways, I hear some... Rarely, like I said, a lot of the ones I know are super quiet. But occasionally, if I do hear about their future plans, they have like this big plan that they want to do for their life, and this people group that they want to help or whatever. But sometimes I get the vibe that they're not taking action on it today. It's like this plan for 50 years from now, almost as a way to avoid the present or something. Like if I ask them like, well, what have you done today? They're just kind of like, oh, well, nothing, but I can't do it because of X, Y, and Z, and this is why I can't do it. And it's like a lot of this putting off their purpose, maybe, like putting off their purpose, delaying it for the future. And then you wonder, like, are you happy now? Like, you have this big plan for how your life's going to be super meaningful in the future, but it just seems like maybe your life's not super meaningful right now. Like, I get the vibe from INFJs that they're kind of sad sometimes, maybe a little lonely, and it just seems like in the present, their life is a little void of meaning, but it seems that they can push it off because they're like, well, in the future, I don't need to worry about, like, right now my life's not super meaningful to me, but I will 50 years from now.
Yeah, it seems like, I think you've had similar struggles as an NI Dom too, of you have all these future plans and future goals, but it's like the little moments of every day that make a great life. It's not the goal of 10 years from now doing something that makes a great life. It's like what you're doing right now in the moment, and having goals, but you're trying to balance in all these functions. Balance right now in the present moment, live a life right now that you love, while working towards a life that you love also in the future.
Yeah, I heard this advice from it was from an ENTJ actually, and I find that people give kind of good advice about their second function sometimes because it's something that they sort of have as a strength but sort of need to work on. So you get kind of some good advice about people's second function sometimes. And so this ENTJ gave the advice. She said it was kind of this question prompt, and it was like, if you only had 3 more years to live, would you be happy with your life today? And I think it's a good question because it shortens that time frame for NI DOMs. The NI DOMs they're relying on this massive time frame. And that was something that I was doing. I was like, I'll do this, and then the next 5 years I'll do this, the next 5 years I'll do this, the next 5 years I'll do this. And then when I had this whole breast lump scare, I kind of realized, time might be actually finite. Like, actually, maybe I'm relying on 70 years, but let's say I only have 3 more years. And I like that time frame of 3 years, because a lot of times people will ask the question, like, if today was your last day to live, how would you spend it? But a lot of times the typical answers are like family, or some people you get kind of these hedonistic answers, because there's not really consequences if you only have 1 more day. So I like the time frame of 3 years, because it's long enough to still have consequences, but short enough that's like, let's get the ball rolling.
Yeah, it's a good question for NI or SE, I feel like. SE, it's like, wow, 3 years, that's a pretty long time. And it's like, wow, that's pretty short.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I have for NI.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I have too. Cool. Okay, moving on to FE. What do you have for FE?
FE, I put, this sort of relates to NI, but chameleon effect. I've noticed this with ISFJs also, but sort of this blending into whatever environment they're in. So it's a little different than aloofness. It's more like you're changing your identity and yourself. Whereas with the axis of TI is really good at identity, self, what are you as a person, what are your beliefs, values, convictions, and sometimes I've noticed INFJs can lose those depending on what group they're in. They just change those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I notice 2 different flavors. Like, I said this, there are a few types that I noticed 2 different flavors. So, similarly with the ISFJ, I noticed kind of 2 different flavors with INFJs, and in those 2 cases, it is gender differences. I don't notice that all the time. Like with the STPs, I don't notice that many gender differences, but with the IFJs, I do. So with the female INFJs I know, they're super in FE, in my experience of them. And with the 3, it's like, I'm not sure about the 1, but so we'll say 3. With the 3 INFJ men I know, super into TI, so you get kind of these different flavors. I noticed that with ISFJs as well.
Yeah, that is a good thing to know. It's almost worth doing like separate videos for the male INFJs versus the female INFJs, because they can look very different. The FE and TI look very different in male versus female, so maybe we'll touch on both, but maybe this chameleon effect will apply more to female INFJs.
I can think of 1 female INFJ that I know that was super in TI, but that's in the context of like probably 8 other women INFJs that I know they're super in FE.
So we'll touch on some male weakness, like TI weaknesses.
Probably in TI, it'll probably come up more. But yeah, for the women, I was gonna say kind of this. It's interesting. I almost was going to write down no opinions, but it's not really no opinions. It's a changing of opinions sometimes, depending on who's in the room. Changing of opinions. So, like, an example was, I used to live with roommates, and there was this whole, like, roommate drama thing going on. And so I talked to this INFJ, and she seemed, like, completely on the same page as me. She was like, oh, yeah, no, this is not great, da-da-da. And there was actually kind of some, like, she said kind of some rude things, I would say, about these other 2. And then the next day, completely, like, flopped. And then she had the opinion of these 2. And then she ended up, like, living with them. And so it was in that moment, I was like, oh, that was kind of super disingenuous. Like, so I was like, that puts her in kind of a bad spot. Like, if I was a super dramatic person, I could have just been like, you know that she said X, Y, and Z about you, so maybe you shouldn't be living with her. But I'm like not gonna do that. But it was kind of disingenuous, I would think. And I do notice INFJs can be involved in drama sometimes. Rarely the cause of the drama, like pretty much never the cause of the drama, but like in it nonetheless.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. One thing I noticed, so kind of like drama, and I noticed they can be in codependent relationships. This is I think I've only noticed this with the female INFJs, but kind of some codependent relationships. Well, similar to the ENFJ, I noticed the ENFJs and INFJs, I noticed it more with ENFJs, but I noticed the ENFJs can hang out with people that have super bad mental health. And with INFJs, I just noticed that they tend to have like one best friend and like pretty much hardly any other relationships. It seems like they got their one best friend, and the relationship gets really close and kind of codependent, and there'll be like drama mixed in within it. And it just seems like they have a hard time with boundaries with that person. And if you spend like 100% of your time with this one other person, it's really important that they are better than you and improving your life, because they're going to rub off on you so much. So I feel like for INFJ, it's really important that you hang out with people that are contributing to your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a healthy FE, because we're talking about unhealthy FE. A healthy FE is going to develop lots of healthy relationships. So unhealthy FE is just developing like unhealthy relationships. It's getting a bunch of just, sort of meh relationships. Whereas I think healthy FE is intentional about who am I surrounding myself with, because they understand that group dynamics affect them. So they're going to make sure that their group is a healthy group and that they're hanging out with the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that sometimes they can just have like low standards for how people treat them. It's kind of like, I think TI, like dominant, you can see like an ISTPs, kind of the rearranged functions of the INFJ, have a lot of self-respect, really good boundaries, a lot of self-respect. Whereas I notice that INFJ sometimes, it seems like maybe because of insecurity, or I don't know, maybe a lack of self-respect, or maybe they just care about other people so much. I'm not sure exactly what the reason is, but they can hang out with people that don't treat them very well.
Yeah.
That's all I have for FE. Do you have?
Last little note I put, we put this on ISFJs too, but we said boring. That's sort of in quotes. It's mostly this unopinionated. So without a developed TI, where you're expressing what you believe, you're expressing differences in the group norm, you're expressing yourself and your identity, you become boring, because you're just like the chameleon effect I was touching on earlier, where you don't have your own self. You're not bringing yourself to the table, and so that can show up as boring.
Yeah. We read in the type quotes video that we did a couple weeks ago, there was a really good INTP quote, and I think it was a good TI versus FE quote, like a good nuanced TI-FE, and it was just talking about that to make a beautiful sounding song, like you'll have different harmonies, so you'll get maybe like 5 different vocalists, and they're all singing slightly different things, and it creates this full effect. Whereas if you had 5 different vocalists singing the exact same thing, it's just kind of boring. It's not as full or as vibrant. And basically what they were just trying to communicate was that you want a beautiful display of different beliefs. That's how you get kind of this fullest picture. You don't want it to be harsh, like you don't want one person singing off key, like, so you don't want to be too discordant, you don't want to be too contrarian, but you want to be contrarian enough to where there's like a vibrancy of different beliefs.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, third function, introverted thinking. This is where I was going to put, this is where I've known, okay, so I was saying like the 3 male INFJs I know, and then there's 1 female INFJ that I know that kind of falls into this category of being kind of arrogant. Now, I don't think that they consider themselves to be arrogant. I think they actually are pretty insecure. And I notice a lot of times with TI, when TI is insecure, it comes off super arrogant and super prideful. You'll notice this I don't notice it that much with TI DOMs, but with TI second and TI third, I do notice that.
TI DOMs maybe when they're really young, but
yeah, you have to be pretty unhealthy and pretty young. But I notice pretty much for most ITPs, TI DOMs, I notice that it's a little better. But it can be really arrogant and just really contrarian for the sake of. It's almost like they don't think that they're valuable unless that they're contrarian. But it was, what book was it? Maybe it was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Or there's some book that it was like, if you want people to think that you're valuable and you want people to like you, the only thing you have to do really, because people are kind of egocentric, the only thing you have to do is like other people. So like Garrett's super good at that.
It's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, I have not read that book, but yeah. So he will just like compliment people, and he just comes off a lot like he really likes people, and then people start liking him a lot in return. It's like he kind of starts it. So it's kind of, so TI, if it's contrarian, it's the opposite of that. It's like, your belief's kind of wrong here, your belief's kind of wrong here, you're 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 kind of wrong here. And over time, it's kind of like the Oreo sandwich. It's like if you're going to give negative feedback, you say a positive thing, a negative thing, and a positive thing. And I think I said it takes 7, in your brain, it takes 7 positive things to outdo a negative thing. So anytime there's a TI correction, it takes 7 FE, compliments, niceties, things like that, to kind of outdo that effect. So it gets kind of exhausting when you're around people that are super contrarian.
Yeah.
And it's it's like they're trying to be more valuable, but it makes them less valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that you ever lose value, but...
Yeah. Yeah, this is unhealthy TI. So TI is at its healthiest when it's balanced with FE well. And the reason we're talking about, like, males versus female, I think culture encourages males to get into TI and encourages females to get into FE. So if you're a male INFJ, you've most likely been raised to use your TI and discouraged to use your FE. So I think unhealthy TI only cares about its own beliefs, its own values, its only thinking. You're just thinking about yourself, because TI is very introverted. If you're already an introverted, you're combining it with your NI, where you're just thinking through your own thoughts. You're like, wow, my own thoughts are so brilliant. You're constantly thinking about your own thoughts, and then when you do show up in the world, you have this bias of, oh, my thoughts are so brilliant, I'm just going to tell everyone how I'm right. Whereas when you're balancing it with FE, you're realizing you can show up with your beliefs, but also make room for others' beliefs, understand that you're not always right. We'll get into, I guess, SE is more open to other people being, other opinions and beliefs and structures and stuff. But
yeah, it's kind of, I think introverted thinking third can be like, I smart, you dumb, if I'm gonna make it. And a lot of times it's when they make these corrections, it's like a misunderstanding. I don't think they realize they had a misunderstanding, but it's like, I said something, they misunderstood what I said, so they think it's dumb. They're like, wow, how can you think that? That's so dumb. It's like, well, it was a misunderstanding. It's like, if you think 98% of people are dumb, maybe you just misunderstand people. Like,
yeah, that's interesting. There's definitely a bias to think people are dumb in unhealthy TI. And if you think that, you're going to operate under that, and you're going to lose a lot of friendships. Whereas if you think that people are smart in general, like I think TI DOMs, they have a healthier TI. They think that most people are competent, smart, well-rounded, so they go under that assumption, and so then people feel empowered around them. People feel like they can express their own ideas because their TI is good enough where they're like, oh, other people, they operate under the assumption that people are good and smart. And if you operate under that assumption, the world responds better to you and is going to respond in like.
Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Like you think everyone's dumb. You end up creating more experiences to back up the belief that most people are dumb. Yeah. So it's very interesting. So it's like the opposite problem with the female and male. Like if the female type listen to this part, they're like, I don't feel like I do that. But if the male type listen to that FE part, then they're like, I don't do that. I have my own distinct opinion. So it's like 2 different types pretty much right there.
Yeah, and the point is, either way, just try to combine these to where they're more balanced. Especially your second and third function, those can tend to be unbalanced and skewed. So try to get those to balance more. So you're using TI, you're using FE, both in healthy ways. You're showing up as your own individual. You're also being kind, generous, giving, and caring.
And the thing that we talked about, like with gender, like culture encouraging women to be more FE and men to be more TI, I think that is exacerbated by the fact that we are from like small town Idaho in religious circles. I think that is going to be really exacerbated. Whereas, I mean, I guess you'll see, but I guess if you grew up in like San Francisco, I think you probably had a different experience, but that's my experience here. The other thing I was going to say, I probably should put in the FE spot, is just a full rounded FE. I noticed FE second, pretty much everyone's second function. It's like you have enough of it, you're not quite sure of it sometimes. So you have enough of it to spot problems with it, but sometimes not enough to solve the problems unless you like work on it and intentionally try to work on it. So you might notice, oh, people aren't getting along, but maybe not enough of it to bring it together. And it's like this reactive versus proactive. FE second can be like, oh no, they're going to think I offended them. What if I said something wrong? I don't know if I hurt their feelings. And it's like this worried about what could go wrong as opposed to being proactive about making sure that things are right.
Yeah.
Okay, extroverted sensing, what do you got?
We've sort of touched on this. Extroverted sensing in this lowest spot can observe rather than enjoy life. So again, it's sort of that taking that background spot, and you're watching around you. So you're using like a tiny bit of extroverted sensing to sort of see what everything's going on around you, but you're not using extroverted sensing in the way it's meant to, where you're experiencing, you're showing up, you're coming into the world to experience it. So it can observe rather than enjoy life.
Yeah, the thing that I was going to say, almost on the opposite point, so I notice a lot of NI DOMs, pretty much like he's saying, like not experiencing life, until you get these spikes of it. Like sometimes I notice people kind of turn off their fourth function and then you get a spike of it.
Yeah.
And one thing I notice is when I was going over this list, I know a lot of INFJs, a lot of the ones on this list, that like don't handle alcohol very well, or that they love to party. Like it's really random. Like they're like the most, like they're super quiet and mousy, and then they will go to raves
and go wild.
Yeah, and then they go like wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you call it, like raves. Like it's almost like a bad way to deal with your problems. Like the partying and the alcohol. It's like good because you're getting into SE, but then it's kind of an unhealthy SE. Like this partying and like getting super drunk. Like I know a lot of INFJs. It's like they're so nervous about how people are going to perceive them. They don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so they're in this box their whole life, and that can be so draining to be around people because you put yourself in this box and you don't want to make any wrong moves. So then when you have alcohol, you just let yourself like go free, and it would be nice if you could like just experience that freedom without alcohol.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it's like there's introversion that does kind of, it makes it draining to be around people, but it makes it 100 times more draining when you have a mask on or you're muzzling yourself. Like there's introversion and then there's muzzling yourself, and it makes it way more exhausting when you're not fully yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you have anything else for us, T?
Yes. I was going to say, this is what I heard this actually from Personality Hacker originally. Steak versus the sizzle. So it's like NI has these good insights. It can be wise and then like TI might have some interesting thoughts, but it's not made attractive to people. So you might talk with hardly any facial expressions, really quietly, and if you're too much in TI, it might come off kind of abrasive. And so then people don't want to adopt these thoughts. If you have a contrarian thought, it's like, well, this person seems kind of sad. They seem lonely. I have a different belief, and I feel like I'm happier than this person, so I'm just going to keep on with my philosophy because it seems like it's actually working. So with SE, you have to make it kind of like attractive. I think what I notice about SE DOMs is they look attractive. They like smile. They're animated. And they make things look attractive to the point where you're like, maybe I want to do that. I think I want to adopt that because it seems like it's really working for them. Like, I think too much NI can seem kind of boring. It's like this professor type, just kind of alone in their dusty pile of books. And you're like, come on in here. And I'm like, I don't know that I want to live that life. It doesn't look super attractive.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now let's go main growth points.
Yeah, growth points. Yeah, I think pretty much a lot of times what is off-putting to people is like you're too much in your first function. There's not enough nuance with the second function. Sometimes too much in the third function, and then not enough in the fourth function. And in general, just too much of your dominant attitude. Attitude being introversion and extroversion. So in this case, like too much introversion. And I think the attitude thing is very important in the case of the INFJ, because a lot of the INFJs I know are super, super quiet, not showing a lot of themselves, like the most quiet people I know. Some of the people that I know the least about, even after living with one for a year, even after having one in the family for like 8 years and not really knowing them. So I think it's just important to understand that like extroversion gives you something. Like it'll give you more well-rounded relationships. FE is so persuasive. Like if you want people to take on your TI beliefs, FE is incredibly persuasive. Something I notice about like ENFJs and ESFJs, they can move an entire room so effortlessly to do whatever they want. It was like it's like this whole battle. It was like a ENFJ versus INTP. It was like the INTP has like the most researched, maybe like some of the smartest ideas, but no one will listen to it because it doesn't seem interesting. The ENFJ maybe hasn't researched the ideas that much, but can get the people to do pretty much anything they want. And it's this whole FE-TI battle. And so I think if you have these thoughts, I mean, working on FE has so much benefit for you. People will listen to your thoughts. People will respect you. If you get some SE in there, it makes it look attractive. I think it just, introverted functions give you a depth. You turn inward, you process things. How did this impact me? How did this? And you kind of turn things around and you can get a depth. So everyone needs introversion. And I think introverts understand that. Introverts understand the value of introversion. I don't find that introverts always understand the value of extroversion. And it goes vice versa. And the value of extroversion is that it becomes attractive to other people and people actually adopt those good ideas. Like, what's the point of having the most precise, profound ideas that no one ever adopts them? It's like, what is the thing? It's like if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it make a sound? Or, it's that whole thing. And it's that sort of thing. It's like, you don't want to have all this and have no impact. Like, it's just so sad. It's just such a waste. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why be on this earth and have no impact and just be only in your head and have it only be valuable for you? So I think for the INFJs I know, I want to know, there's the majority of them that are so much in FE, I would say, but it's not a nuanced FE. There's so much in that nervous FE. And I just want them to be a little bit more brave with it, to, instead of just pouring yourself into like researching your knowledge, to, think about like how you feel about things and communicate that to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biggest advice, it's a little harder for INFJs because we're touching on sort of the male versus female growing, but whatever you resonate with, if you feel like you have too much unhealthy TI or if you feel like you have too much unhealthy FE, try to work on balancing those two functions. So you're trying to develop your own beliefs, your own strong convictions and all of that, but you're also trying to show up in the world, and you're trying to show up in a way that's not overbearing or know-it-allishness. So if you feel like you struggle with TI or too much TI, maybe challenge yourself. Like this week, try to find like something that you really disagree with and just don't say anything about it. Just let it slide. Or if you feel like it's too much FE for you, then maybe find something that you disagree with and speak out about it. Like, so.
Mm-hmm.
And then get into SE, show up in the world, go out and actually do stuff with friends. Find an activity that you like to do with people. Because getting out is super helpful.
Yeah, I think also on the side of the ones that have too much TI, if you disagree with something, start off with a question to make sure. Because I think the issue is that TI says things so precisely. I think when you have a list of synonyms, people with TI pick the best out of all those synonyms. Whereas when I'm speaking, it's like, I feel like I have a pretty big vocabulary, but when I'm speaking, it's like I just pick the first one that will communicate the gist. And maybe there was a better synonym that could have been used, but it doesn't even occur to me. And so then people are like, oh, did you actually mean this? And I'm like, are those even different? So a lot of times you just have to understand that people that don't have TI are not communicating so precisely. So ask questions first. One thing I notice with ISFJs and INFJs is that they ask leading questions. So so if you think you disagree with something, ask a legitimate question, not a leading question. I notice sometimes TI third, FI second will ask a question, like under the guise of it being a question, but it's really just them saying an opinion in form of a question. And that gets old pretty quick.
Yeah.
They'll be like, well, do you think it's actually because X, Y, and Z that such and such exists? And I'm like, okay, you could have just said, I think it's because of X, Y, and Z. I get annoyed at the indirectness.
Yeah,
but I think INFJs are so interesting. It's a very it's a very mysterious type. My conversations with them when I do hear are like super interesting. It's a very interesting type. Yeah, I would love to. I've never been, like I say, I notice a lot of INFJs that have like one close relationship, and I've never been that person. It's never been me with an INFJ. And I could imagine that if you're that one person with an INFJ, you get all sorts of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But I've never been that person, so.
Yeah. Yeah, they're super insightful type. I think when they do show up in the world, they show up really well because they have so much insight. If they're balanced, then they have a lot of great thoughts, great things to bring to the world. Their FE is developed in a way that they're showing up as themselves, but they're showing up in like a way that everyone enjoys and people love to be around. So I think INFJs are a great type. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I like about INFJs is that they give you, when they're healthy, they give you permission to be yourself in a way that not all the types are so open-minded and generous with the idea that you can be yourself. I just wish the INFJs would extend that to themselves, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of that wraps it up probably.
All right.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.